Today I wanted to talk about the idea that the Chinese are planning to replace us. Now this may appear to be very far-fetched, but hear me out. And the other thing I want you to know is that the government is working in cahoots with the Chinese to replace us. You may or may not have seen this video. In this video, this is a classroom full of Chinese children being taught African languages. And this is continuing and happening all over China. And in fact, it would appear that the Chinese government has a systematic plan to train as many of their young people to learn African languages and then send them over and start the process of the takeover. The Chinese have a 100-year plan. Now this is factual, this is not just a story. And in their 100-year plan, the idea is for China to go back to becoming the Middle Kingdom. Now what that means is, during hundreds of years ago, when China was a very big empire, they would call themselves the Middle Kingdom, meaning that they were in the middle and the center of the earth, that everything else revolved around them. And they've held this conceited idea for a very long time. And what they're planning now to do, according to their own documents, is to take China back to being the Middle Kingdom, to be the center of the planet again. Now, this means that necessarily they are quote-unquote superior to everyone else, and as we are supposedly, under that idea, inferior to them. And some Chinese scholars have argued that Africa or Africans are not using up the resources available in Africa properly, that a more effective race of people needs to go to Africa and take over and utilize these resources properly. So in other words, they are planning to replace us, and this is an actual plan. They're arguing that China has grown so much and they need what is called Lebensraum. That simply means living space. That their population is so valuable that the Chinese as a race are so much more valuable that it would be better if they replaced Africans. Now, we've experienced these ideas before from the Europeans, where they argued that they were so superior that they needed to replace all other populations on Earth with the Europeans. And they systematically did this. They went to North and South America, wiped out everyone and replaced those populations. They went to Australia, wiped out almost everyone and replaced those populations. They tried to do the same in Africa. They were not successful for very many reasons. The Chinese are saying the same thing, that they are so superior, their race is so valuable that they need to replace other people around the world, and they need satellites and they need colonies. Now, the primary target is not only Africa but also other areas, but Africa is the easiest target because according to the analysis, African men are least likely to fight back, and in fact it is Africans who are facilitating the Chinese takeover. So we've known for a very long time that there's a depopulation agenda against Africa. This is not news to any one of you, I would hope. Part of this depopulation agenda is enforced poverty. That the policies that are supposed to be pursued for Africa are policies that are supposed to keep Africans fairly poor. Why? Because poverty drives a very high death rate amongst the population. When people don't have enough nutrition, enough medical services, they tend to die earlier. In other words, it reduces the lifespan of people. And so Africa, of course, has the lowest lifespan of any other group of people. And this is intentional. This is not a mistake. The other way that they're pursuing depopulation, obviously, is through these forced injections, whereby you remember the government working in cahoots with the West said that you have to take a certain chanjo, right? Or else you won't be allowed to go to a government office, and so on and so forth. Now, we know that chanjo, some of the consequences is sterilization. It was just basically a mass sterilization event. So some of you fell for it, but many of you did not. In which case, congratulations. The other way that the government is working in cahoots with the Chinese invasion and occupation plans is by giving a lot of immigrant visas to Chinese and Indians also. In fact, we are having hundreds of thousands of them moving into Kenya every single year, unrestricted, and they're moving in with immigrant visas. To this day, the government refuses to release the number of immigrant visas that they have granted to Chinese and Indians. Anything that the government feels the need to hide is usually not good for the population. We need to know how many Chinese and Indians have been allowed to enter this country. The other way the government is cooperating with our imminent demise is the fact that all these foreigners are given special privileges. You have to understand that Indian nationals and Chinese nationals, the ones who are civilians, it is far much more easier for them to be given firearms licenses than for you as an African civilian in Kenya. And this is true. They have special privileges that we don't have. I want you to think about this. There's this shop, this big shop called China Mall. And this China Mall is owned by a Chinese man, right? Who is like 37 years old and bringing in like 10 million shillings per day in revenue. So I want you to think about that situation. A Chinese person comes into Kenya from China and is immediately given access to government property because the Kenyatta University is owned by the government, and a Chinese person was given permission to open up a shop there. Can you, as a Kenyan man, go to China and be given access to a Chinese university? Would they do that? They would never do that for us. And why is this shop being set up in a university? Because a university is a captive market. Thousands and thousands of people, of students, who are right there to be the market. So the Chinese are given special privileges. How come I didn't get the permission to open up a mall inside the university? Why? Because the government generally doesn't work in our own best interest. They work in the interest of whoever controls them from foreign countries, right? So when you look at this article, it really impressed me, this newspaper, this story right here. And what impressed me was to see that Kenyans have come together to sue the government to stop it from screwing us, from destroying our chances in this economy, because they're giving the foreigners all the chances, right? So this is a group, they're calling themselves, as you can see, this group are calling themselves the Indigenous Capital Protection Association, and they have sued the government in the High Court because the government is colluding with a Chinese trader to undercut local traders. And this lawsuit is very interesting. And it is interesting because of what the demands they are making of the government. And it simply means that Kenyans are becoming aware that the government is against us. Okay, the elite is always against us. Okay, the coconuts that took over the country at independence, they set up a system that works against local people because they were put in place by the British to protect Western political, military, and economic interests in Kenya. Right? So the foreigners get first chance, and we get almost no chance within our economy. And I've talked about this before, because if you go to, because I'm a published writer, and if you go to any bookshop in Kenya, you will not find a section written Kenyan books. The discrimination is so complete that if you go to any bookshop, you'll find only foreign titles. They actively discriminate against us, and this is government policy. Now, this group has noticed that this is the actual policy of the government, to promote foreigners and to step on our necks and to keep us down and to oppress us and to keep us poor. The poverty that you see in Kenya is the result of deliberate policy by successive governments over the years. You're not poor by coincidence. The system is rigged against you. Now, these people, this group that is suing the government over allowing the Chinese to take over the market, are simply acknowledging what I have been preaching for a long time, that this is not our country, it's not meant for our benefit. And what makes me so happy is that they are fighting back. Finally, Kenyan men are standing up and fighting back. That's what you're supposed to do as a man, not just take any kind of oppression without complaining. You're supposed to stand up and fight back. So they're fighting back, and they're demanding that the government release the number of immigrant visas they've given to these foreigners, because you're finding Chinese even becoming hawkers. And they said that the problem with this China Mall that is inside a government land, what they're saying is that these Chinese traders are undercutting them by up to 50%. How is it possible that they're selling things for half price? Now, you as a consumer, you may say, oh, that's a good thing, but you don't understand. There's a concept called import dumping, whereby foreign governments subsidize some of their goods to be poured into a third country, which will undermine the market, collapse the local traders who are considered competition, and then you put in your own people in that market to take it over. So don't be naive that it's being done for your own good. And when they do this import dumping, what does it mean? It means death to our manufacturing capability. How can you run a factory when the Chinese are dumping very cheap products in your country? It means there'll never be factories in Kenya. Even the few Kenyans who try to open up factories, between being shut down by KRA, which is an arm of the government, they also have to deal with this illegal competition, which means we have no factories, so we have rampant unemployment. But the Chinese dude makes 10 million shillings a day. So these people are fighting back, and this is something that we want to encourage other people to join. If you feel oppressed by government policies, we encourage you to fight back. Sue the government. Go to court. Form an association, form a group, pull your money together and sue them. It's time we stood up for ourselves. How do you allow foreigners to come and take food from your mouth and to leave you in a slum? How long are we supposed to be poor? So kudos to this association. What they're doing is amazing, and we hope they win. And we hope more and more Kenyans wake up to the fact that the coconuts, the elite that rules Kenya, is an existential threat to the rest of us. In their urge to please their foreign masters, they are truly destroying us and keeping us very poor. So we can say, from all the things that are happening, it would appear that the Chinese program to replace us is in full swing. And if we are not careful, if we do not defend ourselves at this time, within a very short period, we shall be overrun by the Chinese. And they'll do it exactly the way the Europeans did it. As first, they're going to be the so-called missionary class, and then the traders, and then the soldiers soon after. Understand that the Chinese have a 100-year plan, and they are determined to take over Africa. We cannot allow ourselves to be caught flat-footed like our ancestors. We need to prepare in every possible way. We also need to train our civilians to use firearms and to organize them in divisions up to the platoon level. This is very serious. These people are not playing games. They are saying that the coming century will be their century to rule the earth. We cannot allow ourselves, and we cannot allow our sellout elite to do to us what they've historically done to us. This time, the Chinese must not have a walkover like the Europeans did. Ethiopia only survived because they had leaders who saw far in the future. And when they saw danger, they started accumulating guns and training their population to defend themselves. The other African rulers did not see what was coming. We today are able to see what is coming. And it is very important that we prepare ourselves, we prepare our civilian population to defend themselves, because I promise you, the Chinese soldiers are over the horizon. Sooner or later, we'll have to deal with them, whether you like it or not, whether you believe me or not. So what is happening in China and in the East Asian nations is that you can see that they have advanced plans to actually replace us. They are cloning us with the intention of replacing us. That song you just heard is being sung by Asian dudes. There's a whole subsection of Chinese culture that is devoted to cloning African culture. On one hand, they call us low IQ and they despise us, but they are stealing our culture, because the people who create global cultural trends are Africans or black people from the diaspora. So given the incredible power of black culture all over the world, the Chinese are now beginning to clone that. Every time there's a new trend that black people have developed, or Africans have developed, they jump on it and they subvert it to use it for their own political purposes. It's called soft power. So since they don't have that power of creativity, they aim to create clones of us. And now you may think that this is cute, but it goes far much deeper than this in their attempt to replace us. One of the things that the Chinese government has been looking deeply into is the fact that they are not very good in track and field. Like, overwhelming domination by black people in these sports is something that bothers the Chinese, and they are saying that it's them who should be getting the glory from these sports, but genetically they can't defeat black people. So they're entering into this very deep research of picking out specific genes from African DNA and trying to implant it into their children, creating synthetic test tube babies, with the intention of having them run as fast, jump as high, be as athletic as black people. And the research is very deep, because it said that black people have very fast twitching muscles, so that the reaction time is extremely fast, right? These are the genes that they're looking into to pull from our DNA and to put in themselves as a way of replacing us. So when I said that they are actively seeking to replace us, this is not a joke. This is not some wild theory that I have. This is simply borne by the evidence, but because most African men are completely naive and cannot see beyond their nose, you keep on thinking everything is a joke. You keep on thinking that your adversaries are playing games with you. It is only African men who, when you call them, when you do interviews and you ask them, do you have enemies? It is only African men who will say that they don't have enemies. I'm telling you, go out to the streets and ask people, does Kenya have national enemies? They'll say no. Kenya has no national enemies. Kenya has no adversaries. And this is the same in all other African countries. Only African men who are hated all over the world will tell you that they don't have any enemies. Yet the Chinese will immediately tell you that they do have national adversaries. For example, the Americans. The Americans will tell you they have national adversaries, like the Russians. Only Africans will tell you they have no national adversaries. So, because this is the level of naivete in the brains of most African men, then they don't prepare. They are ill prepared to defend themselves from this coming Chinese invasion. And it will come. Sooner or later, we'll have Chinese troops on our borders, on our beaches, trying to launch an invasion. So we have to prepare.